Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I'm having an okay day. It is the day before Thanksgiving when I'm recording this. So like I said, I have the entire week off, which means that I'm able to make videos back to back as not to worry about them later on. So yeah, this has been good. It's been good for my artistic endeavors too, because I've been painting. So it's been nice. Yeah. So today I want to talk to you about something that has actually greatly impacted me in the last couple of days, and that's self-disclosure in relationships. So self-disclosure is important, I think, in any relationship, whether that be platonic, romantic. It's important to disclose things that you think will directly affect a relationship as a whole. But, as always, I have you to do's and don'ts about this topic, and I think it's important that specifically for this topic, how it can be very nuanced about why you're disclosing things, who you're disclosing it to, and why you think they need that information, or why you think that information needs to be thrown into the ethos. So we're gonna jump right into it. As I've said before in my other videos, if you hold these traits, if you've done things like this, don't take it personally and don't internalize it and think, oh shit, talking mushrooms, I am the worst person in the world. You're not. This is definitely something that I think almost everyone does, especially when they're getting comfortable with someone and when they want to progress a relationship. They feel the need to disclose certain things that might give some, backstory to certain things they do or certain things they don't do. So we're gonna jump right into it. So with any amount of self-disclosure, I would like to preface that it's really about the level of trust you receive from that person. I really want you to understand that if a person decides they want to disclose some information to you, that they feel like they can trust you on some level. So whether that's about past trauma, whether that's about like a current situation they're in, it could really show that they trust you with this information and that they want you to understand where they're coming from. So first of all, good job, you've become a trusted person. But then, there's some people who are just word vomit and they feel the need to justify everything they do for whatever reasons. Like, you don't have to worry about what the reasons were, because sometimes it's anxiety, sometimes it's like, I really like this person so I want to tell them. Like, it can be a array of things. But like I said before, don't worry about it, don't freak out, don't feel like if you're doing this that you're unlovable or anything like that, because that's not true. But I do think that the ability to receive disclosed information is reflective of you in that person's life. So they feel comfortable enough to tell you this. So with what you use that information, for is reflective about how much you trust that person. So for instance, if someone discloses to you that, they've been through a traumatic situation, whether that's sexual assault, abuse of any kind, abandonment, they trust you to understand where they're coming from, and perhaps are trying to give an explanation for things that might happen in a relationship. Now, first tip of the video. I'm always putting up two. First tip of the video, though someone discloses something, it might be an explanation for their actions, but it does not excuse their actions. So for example, I've had past friends that, have been in abusive relationships, unfortunately, and the situation was like, after an abusive episode happens, they'll say something like, well, I was beaten as a child, or, I've been cheated on all the time, and XYZ abandonment issues. So they feel like telling the person that, and they can go into depth into a whole story, whether it's true or not, because that's a whole different topic. But whether it's true or not, the person felt the need to disclose that information as a form of an excuse, as opposed to, explaining why this happened. So know the difference in between excuses and explanations, because there is a stark difference, especially in a capacity of disclosure. Keep that in mind. And while we're in the same vein, I would really, really, really like you to think about something in this way. Don't use self-disclosure as a means to manipulate a person in a relationship. So, for another instance, all the instances today, if you have had past situations where you felt abandoned, where you felt like the odd man out, where you felt like you were not good enough, if you are in a new relationship, and I'm going to use the word relationship, but I'm talking about all kinds of relationships, platonic, friendship, platonic is friendship, relationship, romantic relationships, anything like that. So any relationship, I'm saying word relationship. If you start off by it's fine to tell people that, I always kind of feel like I'm not given a lot of attention. Sorry if I come off needy or anything like that. That's completely fine, because that's an honest part of you that you want them to know, because you want this relationship to continue. But If you're using that information as a means to get them to do something in your favor, that's harsh. So I'm going to use an example. I don't know how fond or how aware of y'all of Tina Turner and Ike Turner, but this is a situation that occurred in their relationship. So Ike Turner, we're going to start off. Tina Turner was pretty much abandoned by her mother at a very, very young age. So at a young age, she knew what abandonment felt like. She knew that she did not want to be a person that abandons others. So when she grew up and she met Ike, he disclosed to her that people always leave him, and that even at his worst, he wishes he could have someone that would just stay there with him. And Tina latched onto that. She was like, I feel you, and I won't be one of those people that leaves you because I know how it feels to be left. And then, if you don't know the entire story, pretty much Ike was an abuser. He was just absolutely horrible to her, and he would always use that. So what, you gonna leave me now? Like, after he just threw her across the room and smacked her in front of her kids, he's like, so you're just gonna leave me like all the others? And then Tina had like this internal conflict where it's like, I know I need to leave this situation, but I don't want to leave him because I know how it feels to be left. So y'all need to look up on Tina Turner's story. It's fantastic. She just turned 80, but she's a goddess. But my point remains that if you are going to use your self-disclosure as a means to manipulate other people into something that they are not comfortable with, or a way to excuse your actions against them, that's not good. And if you're a person who feels as though you're being manipulated in that way, but you don't know if it's like, is it me being weird? Am I being insensitive? I don't know what's going on. I think it's a matter of checking the patterns. While I particularly don't like patterns, because I'm one of the people that if I notice something immediately, I'm like, let me just make my way downtown and just like dip. But for those of you who are like, I really want to see if this is a pattern or what the deal is, if you're starting to sense that the only time they're self-disclosing is after they do something horrible to you or abusive or, anything like that, then perhaps you're being manipulated. Because if someone's going to self-disclose, they will typically self-disclose in a situation that is safe for both of y'all. So whether that's pillow talk, where you're just like after sex or after cuddling or during cuddling or during sex, I don't know how y'all talk during sex, but you're sitting there talking like, hey, I feel this way because of this and I'm scared of that. That's a safe space because you're both, comfortable. There's nothing going on. I mean, it's a nice space. Or over dinner where it's just y'all, or something where someone did not just get hurt. Now, on the flip side, for those of you that are like, okay, but I found out about this after something happened to them and then they just self-disclosed. Okay, that's completely understandable. If a person suddenly self-discloses something after, let's say, a relationship dissolves, if something physically happens to them and then they're suddenly like, hey, my reaction to this was probably because of this that happened to me, that's fine. Because as I said, that means they trust you. That means that they want you to understand where they're coming from. My point is, it should not occur after they've hurt you, because that's an excuse, not an explanation. Okay? And I know for those of you who may be in relationships with people who have PTSD from other stuff, and that you're like, I really want to make it work, but it always seems like when something like this happens, I'm the one that gets the short end of the stick. I'm the one that always gets their anger. Here's the thing. I know this might be a controversial statement. I'm gonna say it anyway. You are not responsible for anyone's trauma. You're not responsible for anyone's disclosure. So whether or not it's from a traumatic experience from their past, whether it's from a traumatic experience from today, you are not responsible for that, unless you were. But then that's a whole different topic. But let's say you're not. You're not responsible for that. And if they are using you as a sounding board, which can really become emotionally straining, if they're using you for a sounding board, if they're using you for, I guess, a punching bag, that is not your burden to bear. And it doesn't matter what mental disability, disease, or anything, or physical disease or disability they have. Just because you're their partner does not mean you have to take that. That's kind of like a different tangent. As always, y'all know I go off on tangents, so. But regardless of what they have and how they got it, it's not your responsibility to have to live with the ramifications of it. So I know a lot of my friends who are, romantics at heart, and they stick with their partners. But I've seen their partners do really screwed up stuff to them, and I'm like, y'all, no. But I feel like there's some people that just really, they care about their folk, and it gets to the nitty gritty, and they're like, I'm gonna stick with them until the very end, even if I'm black and blue and my heart's broken and I feel like subhuman, but as long as they're happy. That's a different topic for a different day. Don't you think? But back to the main topic, self-disclosure. I do think it does take some type of trust to do self-disclosure, and I do think that if you're going to self-disclose, something that I actually had to start doing when I was in college is I had a friend who always came to me with his like ridiculousness. And for a while I was like, okay, I'm good to talk to, I'm a good sounding board. And if you need me to get like mirror your energy, I'll get uproar with you. If you just want me to be silent, I can be silent. But then after a while, it took its toll on me to a point where I was just like, I was dreading whenever he texted me. Cause I'm like, oh, now he's going to text me with some BS, y'all. Lord. And I don't want to have a situation like that with my friend where I dread talking to them. So I actually had to speak to another friend and asked her, I was like, what's a good way to tell them I'm tired of being your sounding board? I'm tired of hearing all your problems without coming off as like being a bad friend. And she told me, you can tell him that, can you ask me if I'm available to listen? Because availability doesn't have to be physically, because I'm more than likely physically available. But it can be, am I mentally available? No. Do I have the emotional capacity to do this? I don't. I'm sorry. So when I was able to explain that to him, I'm like, hey, I'm going to be here for you, whatever you need me, but you really need to hit me up and let me know, or ask me before you just disclose all this stuff, because this is making me... It's like a definition called secondhand trauma, where it's like always being bombarded with a lot of people's trauma. And I know a lot of therapists and psychologists have to deal with this, but when you're always someone's sounding board for all the ridiculous that's happening in their life, you eventually start to be panicky, where you're like, oh gosh, what's happening in their life? And that's not your area of expertise. You don't have to do that. Okay, that's my Google going off. I'm still cooking. I was like, oh my gosh. But like I was saying, you don't have to do that. That's not your job at all. So I hope out of like this discombobulated video, as always, my videos have no structure. In fact, all I did was wrote this on a piece of paper. That you know that disclosure is important in relationships, but there is a fine line between disclosure and manipulation. Disclosure and over disclosure. If you're constantly being the person that receives all this negative energy, it's gonna take its toll. So you need to take care of yourself. And while most of us are very caring people, taking care of yourself ensures that you can take care of the other people around you. Anyway, y'all, I hope you have a wonderful week, as I said at the beginning. Like, share, and subscribe. Share one of my videos that you like. Yeah, like I said, if you're not on my Patreon, you should be, because that's where I do my podcast, and it's super funny. I do weird stories about stuff that I've done and people have done. Anyway,